Hello, how are you today? Do you want to dive into a book that might just surprise you? Whether it becomes your next favorite or one you might skip? Let's find out what readers are saying about it.
Sonia, who has 193 likes, says, 5 stars. When I let myself dream, he murmurs against my ear. Or it all comes crashing down. It's Alice. Alice on my mind. Alice all the time. This book was so beautiful. I was so deeply invested in this entire story and all of the characters. I have only read one book of Emily Henry's before this, so my expectations were probably not the same as others who love her work. To be honest, I didn't have any real expectations at all, and I think that is why I enjoyed it so much. But I am also somebody who loves a plot existing outside of a romance in a book. And Emily did this so well. I was questioning at the start why I was going through Margaret's whole damn lineage, but I think every single part of this book was necessary to the story. We needed to understand the family dynamic. We needed to understand Margaret. I loved the structure of the story and how it went back and forth between Margaret's past and the present day. Every part of this story serves to Alice and Hayden's journey. I loved these main characters. I loved the dynamic between Alice and Hayden's completely different personalities and loved to learn how they worked so well together. There was great character development for them both. I loved that we got to follow both Alice and Hayden's personal journeys as well as their journey together. I loved their chemistry. There were so many cute and beautiful moments. Their tension throughout the book was so good, like don't even get me started on their legs under the table. It had me giggling and kicking my feet every damn time it happened. I love how the writing was layered and complex, and the romance felt like it had substance. It was wrapped up so perfectly for me, and when it finished I was feeling so incredibly touched. I know now for sure that I have to read the rest of Emily Henry's books because this is exactly what I want from a romance book. Blank. Pre-read just received a physical arc of this from work 2 days before I go on my holiday. This great big beautiful life has great big beautiful timing. Rowan, who has 418 likes, says, 2.5 stars. Love isn't something you can cup in your hands. And I have to believe that means it's something that can't ever be lost. The Last Great American Dynasty by Taylor Swift. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for how much of a disappointment this book turned out to be. Great Big Beautiful Life? More like Great Big Ugly Disaster. I don't know what kind of delusion had me putting Emily Henry on a pedestal in my head, but somehow I did, because I thought she can do no wrong. In the first 50%, when I was posting updates about how I was actually enjoying the book, I thought, maybe she's going to prove me wrong. Maybe she'll balance out the doubts I had from the very beginning. She never did, not even on the last page. Back in early 2024, I read my first Emily Henry book, Beach Read. I gave it 3.5 stars, not because I didn't like it, but because of a very specific issue. Ms. Genrising. I had heard nothing but praise about how her books were these beautifully written, deeply emotional romances with stunning prose. Now when I read Beach Read, that was what exactly I got. But instead of pure perfect romance, it felt more like women's fiction with a romance subplot. I think you live in a world that's more interesting than the one most people live in. And I wish I could live in it too. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it. I loved the characters, the writing, and everything about the book on its own. But mislabeling the genre threw me off. Mishandling tropes is fine. That happens. But mislabeling the entire genre that's meant to draw readers in makes the whole book feel shaky, even if it's actually good. And that's my opinion. So going into this one, I was prepared. I told myself, if it leans toward women's fiction again, don't be put off. Just accept it for what it is. What I wasn't prepared for was the romance making up, at best, 10% of the book, while the rest was just straight up autobiography. It had a very interesting premise, but it didn't hit like I thought it would. The setup was too good to be true, but the execution was uneven, and the elements that were supposed to shine fell too flat. Alice is a classic quirky but determined journalist, but she doesn't have much personality beyond her job and her endless inner monologue. She's meant to be funny and relatable, but she mostly comes off as awkward in a way that feels forced. The MMC, Hayden, is the brooding, silent type, and at the start I was so into that since quite men are my type. But then his character development is almost non-existent. The characters felt more like ideas of people rather than real, fleshed out individuals. When I let myself dream, he murmurs against my ear, or it all comes crashing down. It's Alice. Alice on my mind. Alice all the time. Her writing and quotes are always majestic at first. I was actually excited. The main characters, Alice and Hayden, had great interactions right from the start. Their dynamic had so much potential. Two rival journalists competing to write the biography of the famously reclusive heiress Margaret Ives. I was sold. Hayden was grumpy yet subtly protective of Alice, and those early moments between them had me hooked. I really thought this was going to be at least 4 if not 5 stars. I was interested in Margaret's life. I was curious about how Alice and Hayden would navigate writing about such an enigmatic woman with such family and media scrutiny. But did I want that storyline to completely take over the book? Absolutely not. This is marketed as romance. That's what I signed up for. And yet, that's exactly what happened. The entire book revolved around Margaret, her past, her parents' past, her great-grandparents' past, light rally her entire lineage. Meanwhile, the romance got completely buried. They were supposed to have some sort of rivalry turned romance dynamic, but there was absolutely no chemistry. Their interactions were stiff, repetitive, and not engaging enough to make me root for them. There was no spark, no tension, just a lot of dry conversations and lots of dry humping. And when we did get small glimpses of romance, they were done so poorly. In the beginning, Alice and Hayden had some really nice moments, but because the book was so hyper-focused on Margaret, their relationship had zero natural progression. Then, out of nowhere, at 50%, Alice suddenly claims she's fallen in love with Hayden. And I was just sitting there like, when? Did I miss something? Because as far as I could tell, they had barely even interacted. I'll give credit where it's due. The prose was beautiful, engaging, addictive. I tore through all 400 pages in one sitting because I simply could not put the book down. That's how compelling Henry's writing is. I loved it and I think I'll always will. I could read her books for the writing but then came the ending after spending the entire book acting like women's fiction and completely sidelining the romance. The story suddenly decided it wanted to be a full-blown mystery novel. Out of nowhere, Alice starts investigating inconsistencies in Margaret's story, uncovering hidden secrets, and making these ridiculous, over-the-top connections. Nothing about this sudden mystery twist added anything to the story, it just made it feel even more absurd. That particular familia connection that happened at the end made me want to bang my head on a wall. From how ridiculous it was. Competing to be Margaret's biographer had potential. So much potential it hurts, but it was bogged down by unnecessary details and odd pacing. The book kept hinting at some big, dramatic revelation about Margaret's past. But when the reveal finally came, it was underwhelming. The story dragged, built up to a weak climax, and wasn't engaging enough to make me care. The competition between them felt artificial, there were no real stakes of rivalry at all. And that's the frustrating part. The characters had so much potential. They were funny, layered, and genuinely interesting. But all of that was front-loaded in the beginning. But the book just threw them to the side to focus entirely on Margaret. The romance was 100% Non-existent. I don't care what anyone says, it was not there. I didn't feel it. I didn't connect to it. And because the book was so consumed by Margaret's story, the author had to rush the romance in a way that felt completely unrealistic and literally laughable. You cannot convince me that two people who barely interacted for most of the book are suddenly in love. It doesn't work like that. It leaned excessively into women's fiction when that is not the genre the book is marketed as. It's marketed as a mix of contemporary romance, humorous fiction, domestic fiction. But it leaned way too far into women's fiction territory. It spent a lot of time on Margaret's whole life and also Alice's personal thoughts, her anxieties, and her career struggles. But not in a way that added depth, just in a way that made the story feel slow and unfocused. It should have either committed to being a true women's fiction novel or stuck to the romance drama it was marketed as. And Hayden got blended into the wall from how the author never cared for his character. If this was meant to have romance, it was barely there. The book would have been exactly the same without it. The Great Big Beautiful Life of Margaret Ives, with Alice and Hayden's romance nowhere to be found. That sums up the whole book if you're interested in reading it. Now I am gonna go and actually sob because this had the potential to be best romance book in the history of forever with the setting that it had, but it ended up being this. So much tropes without executing even one of them right. Arc provided by the publisher Penguin General U. Kin Exchange for an honest review. Thank you very much. Words can't describe how much of a disappointment this was. RTC later BCIM too mad now. Oh my poor heart, I got the arc screaming. Throwing up. Pinch and punch me all together. Eden Yonas, who has 308 likes, says, I personally think the haters are tripping. This was a beautiful mix of a sweeping, unexpected romance and a tale of generational trauma. How we rely too much on time to do the hard work for us. It was brief and it was beautiful indeed. 4.25 stars. Clace, who has 919 likes, says, 4.25. It's yours. He offers. I laugh. Oh, I can have the world? Mine. He says. Yeah, you can have mine. I love reading Emily Henry's books and I love reviewing her books even more. I love how much I love them and I absolutely love ranting and yapping about them. This book was very different from her usual rom-coms and I loved the new direction she took because, honestly, I do love authors trying new things, and this, not so surprisingly, worked out for Emily. I did not feel like this was misgenread because I went in knowing this was leaning more towards women's fiction than a rom-com. So I did not face that problem either, and the comfort that Emily's writing brings me is the best feeling ever because I don't feel like this with many authors. This was also the first Emily book for which I had to wait a whole year, and I hated that because previously I had other books of hers to read and they really filled the gap of a year. But the wait was agonizing and the wait was so worth it because it fulfilled the craving that I had for this book. It's scary how well Emily Henry knows me because why was everything so relatable again? This is voodoo shit and needs to be checked. It was certainly very new and very different. But it was also proof that trying something new can be worth it. Love isn't something you can cup in your hands. And I have to believe that means it's something that can't ever be lost. Her prose is just spectacular. So addicting. And honestly, I make myself slow down when I read her books because I need to digest everything and like I can only read it once for the first time. So I always savor them, but the way they're so delicious I can't stop. It makes me feel seen. I just feel better after reading her books. If I am having a bad day, I'll just pick up her book and it would turn my world around, and this book was no different. It was a euphoric form of escapism because I would come back from uni and I would just lie down to read this and would be so lost in it. The way she wrote it was also very impressive. Like how she managed Alice and Hayden's story with Margaret's book. Truly impressive. It definitely had aspects of mystery which felt so refreshing, and honestly at first I was just reading it for Alice and Hayden's story, but as the book progressed, I got more invested in Margaret's. I would say that this is not my favorite book by her because it didn't grip me from the start like her other books. I had to work my way through chapters to be invested, and it is understandable to see disappointed reactions, but glad I am not among them. When I let myself dream, he murmurs against my ear. Or it all comes crashing down. It's Alice. Alice on my mind. Alice all the time. The characters took me by surprise. Alice was such a refreshing character. Like as usual, she was very relatable, but I loved her determination. How much good she saw in other things. I absolutely loved her optimism, and one thing I love is when characters have flawed or complex family dynamics which shape their character arc, and the same happened here with Alice. With her mom neglecting her work and putting her down, which I hated so much. And her trying to prove herself, it was so sad. The way she just wanted her profession to be valued. I loved reading her perspective and the way she viewed the world. I also really enjoyed her interactions with Margaret, and how she dealt with that process was also very intriguing to see. Hayden, on the other hand, was a bit harder to understand, and I think this was the inability of this book to obtain a second perspective, his perspective. I have only one complaint when it comes to some of Emily's books. That they don't have the male character's perspective, and I feel like having that would have elevated this book more. But as for Hayden, he was charming. The perfect amount of broody. And I loved his subtle gestures. I liked his development as the book progressed. It was truly such a wonderful experience to see him open up and deal with everything. His character also felt very realistic. That's the thing that I love in her books. She manages to capture every character of hers in this unique sense which differentiates them from her other characters, but still makes them so relatable that you have to fall in love with them. I love that about her books. I think you live in a world that's more interesting than the one most people live in, he says. And just as my heart starts to sink with disappointment, with a kind of loneliness, he adds, and I wish I could live in it too. I feel myself beaming. It'll take you some time. I'd like that, he says. Margaret. Her story was not doing it for me at the beginning, but as we moved forward I got so invested in it. Like it was so interesting, and the plot twists were very well written. I liked how it started with their story and then it would say her story, but I loved how dysfunctional these family dynamics were, and at times the family tree got a little bit too confusing, but it was still very interesting to say the least. Emily knows how to write a sibling relationship like we saw it in Book Lovers, and while Margaret's relationship with her sister was so well written, it was also very complex, and it was written in such depth that it's very hard not to love. It was so deep, raw, and emotional. Then we got introduced to Cosmo, and OMG how much I loved her with Cosmo. They were everything, and I fear I will never get over them. I won't say anything more because I want everyone to experience it themselves. It was truly brilliant writing. There's an old saying about stories, and how there are always 3 versions of them. Yours, mine, and the truth. The romance besides Margaret and Cosmothere were our main characters in this book, Alice and Hayden. And I loved the chemistry between them. It was so intense and raw. Like it was so well developed, and all of it felt so natural. Like the romance was not the main focus, but still everything just fit right in. I was scared when I saw the early reviews talking about the romance, but for me, it totally hit. The tension between them was sizzling. How they went from rivals to lovers was so good, and I liked how their interactions changed each time and how they opened up to each other. The spice was also well written, and LMAO I loved how horny it was, and can we talk about how intense That hug was like goddamn. That hug was the horniest, most intense, sexiest hug I have ever seen. I loved the romance a lot, and although I wish it focused on it more, I still think it was appropriate and sufficient. I feel like you're mine. Like you're mine in a way no one else ever has been. The plot was very interesting, specifically because of the way it was told. Two writers fighting for one position, and it was also focusing on the story that they were meant to tell and how it was overlapping with Hayden and Alice's characters. I loved how it progressed and how it concluded. I feel like it was the strength of this book, and what I really liked were the plot twists like the first one I kind of predicted, but the second one shocked the fuck out of me. Like I was kinda mad I didn't figure it out before because it was right under my nose, but yeah. I really loved it. Overall, I would recommend. My ratings for her books. Beach Red, 5 stars. Happy Place, 5 stars. Funny Story, 4.75. People We Meet on Vacation, 4.50. Great Big Beautiful Life, 4.25. Book Lovers, 4.00. I find myself thinking that maybe every bit of heartbreak in life can be rearranged and used for something beautiful, that it doesn't really matter whether I chose this path or I was born onto it. So long as I stop and appreciate the path itself. Blank _ served. Ate and devoured _ finally free from my exams, so it's time to start this banger of a book. _ secured the arc. I still can't believe it _ that time of the year where I check my house to see where Emily Henry has installed cameras because she can't keep getting away with writing relatable characters. Great Big Beautiful Life. I think I am getting used to the title. It's gonna be linked to The Last Great American Dynasty. Bouquet. I won't forgive you for this one. Leah, who has 219 likes, says, one thing I've always enjoyed about Emily Henry's romances is that they are not strictly romances. In each of her books, she weaves in an equally as compelling story between the main romance plot. In Great Big Beautiful Life, this takes the form of Margaret Ives, a once so-called tabloid princess turned reclusive octogenarian who's finally ready to divulge the secrets of the rich and famous Ives family. Our protagonist Alice Scott finds herself on a small island in Georgia with the hope of being the writer to pen the book about Margaret's life, only to realize she's not the only writer chasing the story. Great Big Beautiful Life takes a step in a slightly different direction from Henry's previous work. The narrative structure is very different to her other books. It's somewhat of a family saga, and even brings in an element of mystery towards the end. I was practically racing through the last few chapters to find out what would happen, which made it all the more exciting. The sections which unfold the Ives family history are also evidence of Henry's constantly evolving writing, and it was refreshing to read her trying something a little different with this book. The pacing of the romance does feel quite fast, which might be because the novel isn't entirely focused on their budding relationship. We spend a lot of time between their scenes unraveling Margaret's story. But then again, Alice and Hayden are stuck on an island for a month with no one else to hang out with. So maybe it speaks to that. Overall, Great Big Beautiful Life is compulsive and incredibly touching, perhaps her most heartfelt yet. With Emily Henry's trademark penchant for writing a sexy, tension-filled, and emotional romance, I had a blast reading it. I also don't like to compare books, but if I said it has subtle vibes of Beach Red meets The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, then what? Thank you so much Penguin UK Books, Viking for the advanced copy. Great Big Beautiful Life comes out in the UK on 24 April. Got the arc. It arrived at my door this morning and now my weekend plans are sorted.